Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the police department today. Just going to get right into it because I know I think Hutch used some of my time as well as his. So,
We're still 15
He just turned
minutes.
around.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I got the timeline right here. We're good.
No secrets that operations under the great command of Deputy Chief Adams takes the largest part of our operating budget. When we take a look at the next slide, just if anyone's curious, we did rearrange some internal staffing. So we have moved some of those resources that were in uniform patrol to administration to help balance the workload among the 4 deputy chiefs. So I wanted to talk about department goals. I think council's heard me discuss many of these. One of the things that arose out of the Lynn Haven Mall incident that I think we all remember from a while back was a pledge to the community that we would have an outside independent assessment of some of our high liability general orders. Unfortunately, we still have not had that occur. It took a while for it to work through the RFP process, and on the first go round, we did not have a suitable vendor that applied. So once again, it's went through the process. Deputy Chief Adams is overseeing that, and I believe we are once again down to 3 vendors. I know at least one of them is suitable if they would rise to the top. So hopefully that will be something that we will get accomplished for this community, for this body, for the police department during this calendar year. We talked about an outside assessment of staffing needs, and talking to staff, it's something that we're not aware of ever having been completed for your police department, not in any recent time. So I had a great call. We have a vendor, Matrix Consulting has been selected. I had a call with them this morning. Seems like a very professional team that's going to come in, give us that true outside independent assessment of where we are as an organization, to see if there's room for improvement, for effectiveness and efficiency. And I think they have promised that they'll have something for us to review by the end of the year. And development of a discipline matrix. This is something that I think is sorely needed. I know I've had conversations with Mr. Luciano and the PBA and the different groups. Right now, we're kind of all over the place when we discipline our folks. Sometimes it's folks trying to remember what someone did in alike and similar circumstances if we sustained 2 and 3 years ago. What I really want to do is bring that forth, that we have a defined disciplinary matrix with a set of rules and standards that is built on progressive discipline, so that when our folks violate our general orders or our field guides, they're not guessing. Is this something that I'm going to get a slap on the wrist? Is it suspension? Is it demotion? Could it be termination? Sometimes our folks don't know, and sometimes we don't know, and we have to put our heads together collectively. So I think we are doing our officers a disservice, and now that we have restructured internally and we have a planning and research bureau and not just centered solely around accreditation, this is something that they are working on and that they have made this a top priority. And it's my hope that we will have input from this body, we'll have input from the different associations as we bring this forth for consideration. Last and not least, for those department goals, is really taking a look at our off-duty employment. If you hear it, I am not against off-duty employment. Matter of fact, it is something that we absolutely have to have because we do not have enough officers to do the things that we need to do in the community. So I am not opposed to our constituents or your constituents and our establishments hiring our off-duty officers, but I think we have to put some controls around them. Right now, I cannot tell you how many officers are wearing this uniform with our power and authority and are out there working in the community right now. I think we can all agree that that's not where we need to be. We need to put some controls around it. One of the things that we have that I've seen is those off-duty details are using our equipment, our vehicles, the wear and tear, and we're not charging those people that are employing our officers for that wear and tear. So there's a number of things that we need to do to really take a look at off-duty employment and make sure that we're adhering to best practices and reducing liability for the city. Technology. This council has been very, very gracious and allocating funding. And I know Peter Wallace and his team are in the back. We had a great Zoom call yesterday. I can't sing their praises enough that they are really helping move this police department forward in terms of technology. So one of the things that we're quickly moving to implement will be the license plate reader technology. I think that is a critical part of any violence reduction strategy. I know there's been some concerns about how we're going to deploy that. Mr. Stiles' team has just given me a legally validated governance policy that they believe will satisfy this council and the community. That will be coming to the manager shortly so that he can get it before this body for review. E-ticketing is going to happen. I know that you probably heard it for years and years, but we have a contract in hand, and it will happen sometime before the end of the year, so that our folks can maximize their time and not handwrite citations. The Chorus Intelligence software is still something that we are working with Chorus, who has now relocated their North American headquarters to Virginia Beach. It's definitely going to help our detectives become better. Instead of going to all those separate disparate data sets to search for information, it'll bring it all under one cloud-based umbrella. Instead of having to go to 8 different places when they're doing an investigation, it's a one-stop shop for us. Axon Fleet mobile video recorders. So I think since I presented last budget presentation, we're all aware that we now have body-worn cameras for all sworn individuals. The second phase of that was putting mobile video recorders in all of our marked police cars. So out of 250 cars, we're about halfway done. It's about 125 cars. And you may ask, why do you need body cameras and mobile video recorders? I'm going to give you a prime example. Before I came over here today, I was reviewing a number of internal complaints. And we had a complaint on a young officer that a young lady said touched her inappropriately on an arrest. The body-worn cameras were able to refute that from a number of officers, that one, it didn't happen. But while she was sitting in the back of that police car, with the police camera in the car capturing all that, you could hear her intent as she said, I'm going to mess with this officer, I'm going to screw his life up, I'm going to make this spurious complaint against him. So can you imagine, to the satisfaction of the officer, not only is he cleared from the body cam, but now we know the intent behind the false allegation because it was captured by the mobile video recorder. So not only does it protect our officers, it protects this community, and it helps us build cases for those individuals that are engaged in criminal conduct. I spoke about Axon, still very, very much in the early development, but we were getting very, very close to having something in hand by the end of the year that will replace our 25-year-old records management system. I think council is aware that we are still doing, in many cases, handwritten reports. And those handwritten reports then have to go through a series of checks and balances before they're actually entered and they become actionable data. And we are struggling, as I presented to council at the end of the year, with property crimes. And one of that struggle is the fact that much of that data is stale. It's at least 7 days old before we're getting it, and we're seeing those clusters where we need to deploy our officers on hotspots. That will solve it. We're just not there yet. Mobile data computer replacement is on the way. We're going to give the men and women of this fine department brand new computers in the cars, which will allow them to do that in-car instantaneous field reporting. They will have the opportunity to take those MDCs out of the car, use them as a tablet, so if they're responding into your residence to complete an offense report, your car was broken into or stolen, and now they're going to walk in and sit down at the kitchen table with you and talk through it. They can do it right there and not have to sit in their vehicle. And this council was extremely gracious when I came before you last year and pleaded my case for technology, that you have provided the funding for the hardware, the software, the infrastructure for the police real-time crime center that will be in the new police headquarters. Unfortunately, the timeline on that one, and I believe the managers spoken that due to a lot of the supply chain issues that we're now looking at July of 2023. But one of the things that we do need from council so that we are ready to turnkey is the personnel. So most of my request was for personnel and not actual hardware, software, and financial needs. So I've asked for 17 additional bodies, and the manager has been very gracious, realizing that on average, we have 72 full-time FTE vacancies for sworn staff at any given time. Unfortunately, that number as I stand here today is at 91. So he has allowed me to go ahead and reclassify those positions that I urgently need right now, to take those from our sworn vacancies. And the only thing that I would ask and that I would plead is that I'm not saying that I don't need all 803. I do believe, like I've mentioned, that I need more than 803 to do everything that you in this community expect. But I think this is a great compromise to get us started. And if we can ever get to what we believe to be full staffing, that we'd look to increase that authorized complement back up to at least 803 where we are, and then maybe beyond if I bring a compelling argument, which I think I can. And then what I would like to do is just briefly for this body go over what those 17 positions are. 11 of those will be for that real-time crime center, which will be that 24/7 operational component for the police department and the city that will monitor our city camera network. It's going to monitor our shot spotter that we have in 2 locations. It's going to monitor our license plate readers, something that is very pertinent to what we have going on this weekend that we'll discuss later this afternoon is our social media monitoring, our social network analysis. It will be our crime analysts will be built in there, and then help with our National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. All those guns that our officers are recovering are getting tested. They're getting linked to other crimes, many from other municipalities that surround us, but it takes someone to build that investigative profile and pull all that contextual information. And we really don't want detectives doing that when they should be doing police work. So that's why we need civilian staff to really help us in that real-time crime center. They will need a supervisor, and we're also asking for the equivalent of a civilian lieutenant to oversee that entire function, so I can keep cops that wear badges and guns on the street doing things cops need to do, and that we hire qualified people behind the scenes with our tremendous professional support staff to support the functions that we need. We're also asking for a replacement for the City Hall sergeant that we have implemented with Sergeant Philippone over here now to help oversee the security functions for this building and the new City Hall. His position had to come from an operational command that we have, and we do need to backfill that one. One of the things that we have asked for is to civilianize the lieutenant that oversees our services unit. So services is doing all the paperwork, the records entry. It really can be, and the best practice across the country is that should be a civilian manager and not a sworn function. So the hope and goal is, now that we are converting, we will have a civilian manager overseeing our services unit, and that lieutenant that it frees up will do something that I think we all want, and that's oversee some of the juvenile youth initiatives that we would like to see come out of the police department. And that's overseeing, under a centralized command, all of our school resource officers, our newly implemented cadet program, and eventually, hopefully, summertime youth programming and youth academies. Public safety supervisors, we have a sergeant right now that's overseeing the red light cameras, false alarm reduction, uniform and supply. Once again, best practices across the country is that should be a civilian manager and not a sworn position. By converting that, what it will allow us to do is dedicate a sole supervisor to our aviation unit. So one of the things that we did recently, we received the report back, was to ask for an outside independent assessment of the helicopters. It's not my forte. I didn't have much experience. So I wanted to get an outside independent assessment to make sure we were in good shape. And it came back, said, we had some things that we could tweak, but very stable. But the one strong recommendation that they made is that we had one sergeant overseeing both the helicopters and the bomb squad. Two very high liability, dangerous positions. Said you need to separate it. The liability involved with both of those requires an independent supervisor for both. And that's why we needed to make that separation and put an additional sergeant so that we only have one sergeant in charge of the helos and one in charge of the bomb squad. A position that we haven't had that I think will be incredibly beneficial and it will pay for itself in short order is the amount of equipment just assigned to the police department. We have 610 just vehicle and fleet assets, and that doesn't include our equipment. The way it is right now, each individual command kind of oversees where we are on that one. They make their own pitch for replacement on whatever cycle they deem necessary. I have pieces of equipment that have been underused and underutilized, and that needs to change. So what I'm going to do and what we have done, and I think it's been very beneficial, we had a great meeting with Fleet. They were very receptive. So instead of numerous different individual officers from various commands coming to Fleet and trying to make their case for various pieces of equipment, we will have a singular dedicated fleet management position and equipment management position that will coordinate those assets on behalf of the entire police department. They will then consult with the senior staff before any determinations are made on what types of equipment we're going to try to acquire and how we do that. Almost done. Forensic specialist. We're asking for a forensic specialist because almost every felony arrest or significant arrest that we make, someone has one of these mini computers in their pocket, and we're doing search warrants to get in there because these all contain evidence of multiple crimes in many cases. So instead of a detective going through that process and downloading it and sifting it for evidence, it's something that can be done by a civilian and something that should be done by a civilian. And last and most least is an additional victim caseworker in our detective bureau. One of the things that we have received, I don't want to say complaints, but some feelings from the community. Some of our members that they have victims where their relatives or other relations have been victims of violent crime, and they're looking for more. They're looking for more from the police department, more contact, more information, more than just we're investigating. And what this allows us to do is it allows detectives to work hard to bring closure for those victims of violent crime, but gives us a non-sworn position to not forget about those that need our help, that need our assistance, that need our compassion, but allows the detectives to work that case so ultimately we can bring them what they want as closure. And I think that's it on behalf of the police department.
All right, any questions? Rocky?
Mr. Mayor, the fire chief talked about the step plan.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to hear what your comments are on the step plan that was mentioned. I think the fire chief was pretty much on board with it.
Councilman Holcomb, it's needed. It's necessary if we're going to be competitive and we're going to compete outside of this region. I just came back from a conference with all the other major city chiefs. It's the top 69 biggest police departments in the nation, and in North America, includes Canada. Everybody is competing for the same amount of people. But when I reach out and I talk to other folks trying to recruit them to Virginia Beach, they want to know definitively over time how much money they can expect to make.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else? Linwood?
Yes, Chief, thank you. These staffing initiatives that you just went over, are they all funded in the budget?
They're going to be converted positions, sir. And that's
But they're in the budget? Yes. Thank you very much.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Michael?
I think Mrs. Henley had her hand up first, so I'll defer to her, and then after her, I'll be happy to ask a question. I was real pleased that we were able to do some things last year based on your recommendation, and I think we've been hearing about the additional cameras at the oceanfront and so forth. One that really intrigues me is the Shot Spotter program, and having read the response that some of you all were able to get in visiting some of these, how is that? Is that an annual payment that we make, or do we purchase something, and how does that work?
Ma'am, it is on a leasing program, and the one downfall about the technology is that it is not inexpensive. It is $70,000 per year per square mile. So each deployment area is $140,000. We're paying out close to $300,000 per year out of city funds for that technology, but I think it's worth every penny of it.
So what you have in the budget for this year would be to continue just the areas that we have now covered, or are you planning to expand any?
I think there are some funds, and I'll let the manager weigh in if confirmed, but I think there are some funds somewhere for expansion if we determine that that is the direction that we want to go. And I'm willing to research that if we feel that that is something that you would like the police department to take a look at.
Well, I think given what we read about every day in the newspaper or hear on the news, it's an issue that we need to follow through on, and it seems to be particular areas. So they would be beneficial if they were under this program.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Henley, it's all deployments are going to be based on the data. So we look at 3 to 5 years of historical data for homicides, shooting offenses, robberies, shots fired incidents, and we let the data tell us where we should deploy. So we can ask our folks to take another look at that to see if we have a data-driven need for expansion.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
fascinating.
Mr. Mayor, just to
Yes,
clarify.
yes, Mr. Dehaney.
The CIP presentation is going to be provided by Kevin Fairley. Kevin Fairley will present a little later today on that specific matter, Councilmember Henley. But from last year, Council did appropriate additional funds for an additional location. And as the Chief said, the Chief is currently evaluating the data to get a sense of where it would be best to deploy this technology. And we do have in the budget the funds proposed for the funds for taking care of the annual cost of maintaining the system.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
great. Thank you, Mr. Dehaney. Anybody else? Michael.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
As I acknowledged earlier, thankfully, Virginia Beach is a community that respects and appreciates public safety professionals and strives to do what we can to support them. And obviously, many of the ways we can do that is through compensating fairly the people who serve our community in this way. But there are other ways that we can express our appreciation and support. It's never been a more challenging time, from what I hear, to be in law enforcement particularly, but I think public safety generally. That's why people are leaving the field. That's why people are choosing not to enter the field, which is compounding the staffing problems that exist in every field. That's particularly true for public safety and law enforcement specifically. And I just wonder, and maybe you don't have to answer this now, but you may have some thoughts here. Is there anything, for example, in Virginia Beach, we know that we proudly celebrate military families. And I know it's always been true, bless you, but it remains true that the families in law enforcement are under extreme pressure. That, not necessarily, you don't enter that field for the high wages. They're dangerous conditions, potentially lethal conditions at any moment. It causes tremendous stress and pressure on families of people who are in service. And I was really happy to see this exhibition at Lynn Haven Mall just yesterday that showcased the art of military child. But that's just one example of how our community is wrapping itself around military families. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on ways that we can, in addition to what we're doing with compensation, improve working conditions and quality of life for all the families as well as employees who are involved in public safety, police specifically.
Councilman, I think it's quite timely that you brought that up because that was a huge conversation at the conference. And, pay is, of course, a big issue, especially, that they're looking in comparison to other large city departments and not just from a regional component. But what is really driving officers away from the profession is what has occurred in this country over the last 2 years. And that was made quite clear by every chief in the room that the prime reason that folks are leaving is because they feel abandoned by their communities and their elected officials. And one of the things that, luckily we don't have that problem in Virginia Beach. You fully support public safety. You fully support this police department, but that is not the case in other cities. It's not the case across the Commonwealth. And one of the things that we made a recommendation as a collective group that it's great that individually Virginia Beach and our elected officials are saying we support our police, we stand behind them. The police chief is telling the officers, we're telling the officers, the deputy chief, we support you to go out and do legal, fair, constitutional policing. It's got to be greater than just an individual community. It's going to have to be something done at the federal level to ensure the folks of this profession that they have the support of this nation to go out and continue to proactively address and reduce crime, because we're seeing what has happened. We are paying the price right now for the last 2 years, and we have bodies dropping in the street because of it. And it's going to have to be bigger than just an individual localized community initiative. It's going to have to be something on a national level, and that was the recommendation from that collective group is we need federal help to really rebrand policing, get the support back, and reassure an entire profession that this nation supports them.
I appreciate that. I wish there was something that we could do at this city level, at this body, that would have the impact that you described, but I know that there isn't. But I do know that this council over the last 2 years and previously has invested in the salaries and made clear that we do support public safety professionals. However, addressing the salaries isn't enough. We have to go think holistically to a quality of life, into every element, the same way we do for military families as a community. And I think we need to restructure and rethink how as a body. But I don't want you to leave here without seizing the opportunity just to say, I speak for myself. I know I don't speak for the council, but I do believe that our city, I believe that our city supports public safety professionals, and I just want your team to really know that and to feel it. But I also am curious, and we could talk about this later, how we can do better in terms of delivering on that promise. And that doesn't diminish the fact that there are disparities. It doesn't diminish the fact that mistakes do happen, and there is room for improvement always, all the time, in every field, including in law enforcement. However, the people I know who work in this field are dedicated public servants who love their community, and I think it's very important, very critical that we make sure that they all know that they're supported.
Thank you, Councilman, and I just reiterate for this esteemed body that the men and women of this department, thank you for your support. They feel supported by this community, by this body. Unfortunately, what is going on a national level transcends here, and it's rippled across the profession.
Rosemary?
Well, I think Michael made a very good statement that represents how this body feels, and we also want to thank you. You really brought a lot of exciting things to the art of policing, and for us to grab hold of, to be able to take us to the next level of keeping our community safe. With a lot of the technology and reconfiguration of what you want to do with the department. So very exciting to see the initiatives that you have brought forward to us, just like you did last year. And those things, they're working. They're really, really working. And so and you just keep, it's like, you're building blocks. You just keep building to make things better. I did have a question, and that's about the fairly newly created substation out on Atlantic Avenue and how that's doing.
With the events approaching us, I think what you'll see is a much more dedicated presence in there. Our staffing in the off-season is extremely limited, so the goal and intent of acquiring that was for the summer resort season, that we can use that as necessary. I think one of the challenges, too, we would like to probably use it more than we are currently, but once we got in there are some significant structural issues that need to be addressed that I know that the manager is aware of.
That's, council members, that's a part of the proposed budget as well, is to finish the build-out of that location to make it more habitable for the police department, and also on occasion the ambassadors and other departments and programs that will operate out of there as well.
Well, you made a really good point. It's not just for the police, it's going to be for the ambassadors, and is it kind of sort of like a welcoming station as well?
I think we have the opportunity to make it whatever we want, Vice Mayor, and I think the doors are open, and it's going to be one of those locations that any public entity that needs to come in there and use that while we're open and operating. And as we move into the summer season, I know Captain McBrien has big plans to have his officers in and out of there on a much more frequent basis.
Thank you so much.
But it has absolutely had the desired result of us taking over possession of that property, and then working on some relationship building with the individual bars on either side. We've gotten a lot of cooperation, and a lot of the disorder and problems that we have had over the past years in what we call the block. I'd ask Councilman Tower, because I know he's fully plugged into it, but at least my assessment, and I think the team's assessment, is it's been a big win, and we've really seen a cessation of disorder.
Well, that was a strategic area, and it was something we've been wanting to do for a long time. We just didn't have the opportunity to have the
Yes, ma'am.
spot.
Okay, Guy.
Yeah, there's a very, very positive feedback about the acquisition of that site and the use of it. Some concerns expressed to me about why there are not more people, why it's not more visibly in people in there, but I assume as summer approaches, we'll see more use of it. And obviously, maybe some other, you saying structural issues, making it safe and habitable, been a bigger job than we thought it might be when we first started, I guess.
Absolutely. But I can guarantee that DC Adams is in full swing to move our summer staffing resources to the ocean front and up staffing our OCOP units. So we're going to have more bodies down there starting this weekend.
Starting this weekend, yeah. Good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Sabrina.
Good afternoon, Chief Neudigate, and thank you
afternoon.
for your presentation
Ma'am.
and all of, it's good to hear all of the progress that you're making. And I'd just like to say, as a former police chaplain, I want you to know how much I appreciate what you and your department, what you do. But I also, I'm focused as well on the mental health and the care of the officers. I know that when I was a chaplain, the chaplain corps was a part of that process in terms of riding with the officers and being that listening ear and that present ministry to help. Is that something that the department is still doing? Has it been helpful?
I think it diminished for a little while because of COVID, and we were not allowing the ride-alongs because we were worried about the cross-contamination. But we're back in business. The chaplains are a huge part of what we do. I think we just put on a new chaplain class, and is it 20? Roughly 20 new chaplains just came on, so something that we're very invested in, and we are worried about. That's one of the things that we're very concerned is about the cumulative trauma effects for the things that our officers witness. We were very fortunate that we were able to hire a safety officer, Mr. Mike Gresham, and he's really taken on that role to help look out for our officers and plug them into the different resources. And I know that, I don't know if that's going to be part of a separate budget discussion that the manager will talk about, but I know one of the things that we are discussing for the future is dedicated psychological services for public safety. independent of occupational health because they have an entire city. But what I envision, I think what all of public safety envisions is a true psychologist that we either hire or contract with. That,
Chief, hold on a second.
I'm sorry.
That Kevin, that authorization is being requested in this proposed budget, right? Yeah. So, and I think Chief would be remiss if we didn't thank the sheriff for that, because really the sheriff led the way with helping to bring the contractor on board. That's going to give us an opportunity, if council authorizes it, to be able to pilot what the chief is trying to work out with Chief Hutchison and Chief Brazel and also Jada Lee, to have some dedicated psychological services for our men and women.
And the thought is, and from a previous life, that when you have that dedicated individual that is there from the beginning, when we are onboarding them and they're going through their psychological process, that they get to know our folks, that there is a baseline established, so that when they're in a critical incident, I'm not sending them to some new psychologist that has never met that officer before. They are going to someone that knows this police department, that knows our officers, and they can give me an accurate assessment of, we never want them to violate HIPAA, but I need somebody that can call me and say, Chief, he's struggling, he or she is struggling, I need to take them off. Let's put them in an administrative assignment or whatever that may be. Or once we get to the point, Chief, I'm comfortable for you to give them their police powers back. They're in a good place and they're ready to go back and serve this community.
Well, that's certainly good to know. That's a program that I'm happy to support because I believe during this time, in the pandemic, we understand how important those types of services are for everyone, but especially our public safety and our police officers and those who experience stress and trauma all the time. It's just a listening ear to talk to. It does volumes for the person. And it's a part of, it's a healing process. And so I'm glad that you're working on that program.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Wooten, and I think we have to, because
Absolutely.
things are changing. 33 years ago, a police officer would never admit that they were struggling with anything. They're never going to admit that they've got some build-up trauma. But we are slowly chipping away at that stigma. And I just real quick, and I'm not trying to take up time, but I went to a session with about 50 officers a few months ago, some that have been involved in critical incidents and struggling in many capacities, and I was skeptical. I walked in that room. I've been a policeman for a long, long time. I know how cops are. And they started going around the room, and I'm thinking, out of 50, there may be 5, 6 that may share their stories. Half. I think there was 25 people that stood up and shared where they are mentally, what they're struggling with. It was a paradigm shift for me, that the profession is changing. We're chipping away at the stigma, because that's not the history of law enforcement that I know. And I think as a body and as leaders, and we have to provide those services for our men and women.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
for sharing.
Okay, anyone else? And Chief Neudigate, if I can, I impose on you for a couple minutes. This is obviously a very important thing, and I'm going to make a comment. Michael Bellucci brought up something that, I would like to address right away. But about a month or so ago, there was, I believe it was a Christopher Newport, survey done that showed that the Virginia Beach Police Department was the most respected and trusted in the area. And in these volatile times, I just think that speaks volumes. And I think what's happening, a dynamic of the investment that we're putting in to our police department with the technology, with the equipment, I think it's really building bridges with the community in terms of, we're out there, we're involved with the community policing. And I was going to bring up something during council comments, if you don't mind, if you could indulge me a few minutes.
Mayor.
I'll bring it now. You brought up that, the violence is a national phenomenon. Recruiting police is a national, challenge to everyone. And, we can't fix what goes on nationally, but we can certainly do something about what we can do locally. And we are acutely aware that violence knows borders, especially in the 757. And, recently, we are certainly not immune, but, a lot of our neighbors have gone through a significant epidemic of violence that has been happening. About a year ago, Mayor Tuck from Hampton, we had a few meetings about getting together about what we can do, but it was during the COVID and was tough. And in lieu of what happened, Mayor Tuck and I, requested a convening of last Friday with the mayors, along with the city managers, and I'm proud to say that Mr. Dehaney was there. And there was a discussion like I never heard before. It was open. It was frank. It quite frankly took a lot of courage because we were having those conversations nobody really wanted to have before in confronting what we're confronting. And the solutions are not easy solutions, but they have to be discussed. They have to be ironed out. We have to identify the problem, what it is, what caused it, come up with a short-term intervention, a long-term intervention, and get it fixed. It's a simple model. But police have had barriers along the ways. One of the mayors, mayor from Norfolk, brought up, what happened after George Floyd, that tragic killing, and what it did to police departments. We talked about, police leaving and why and what we have to do. And, the point is that, talking about it and feel-good measures ain't going to work no more. It's going to be proactive. It's going to involve a lot of people. It's going to involve our legislators. It's going to be a return to respect of law and order. And, it's going to require a culture change of many people that just don't respect. We even find in this chamber that civility is sometimes no longer part of the lexicon of dialogue in this country. But we, as the regional, we could, the mayors are getting along. We call ourselves the 757 Magnificent Seven. And we all want to help. And every city, including Pocosin, Isle of Wight, and everything, shared their stories about what's going on. And I'll tell you what, it was frank, it was bold, it was honest. I reached out to Governor Youngkin, and he got in touch with, Bob Morse, our public, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, and he is going to take the message, statewide, but also he wants to come down here with his entire crew and sit down with all the folks involved in this area. It's time to work. We can't talk about it anymore. But the thing is, I commend the men and women in blue that run, that, once again, I'll say it, when a call comes in, you never know what's going to be at the other end. But your folks are ready, and we got to be there ready to help you. Thanks a lot, man. Forgive the pontification, but I thought it was important. Thank you.
Mayor, we thank you for your leadership on that. And on behalf of the men and women, I'm grateful to serve them, and they do a wonderful job, and they thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.